Chapter 19. 1652 hours, April 16th, 2539 military calendar. Trome system, planet boundary, southern Iran mountain range, firebase designated Teal Base. Teal Force was almost finished staging their gear in the hastily created assembly area north of Sanctuary's city limits. Looming in the distance was the mountain range they would cross in short order. The main force was a combined ground and aerial assault over the low-lying saddles simply known as the Southeast Corridor to the locals, and Teal Force would approach from the brackish waters off the western littoral waters. They had once again reclaimed his outpost. The moniker Teal Base was quickly spreading around, patrolling and fortifying the area. The company commander had been briefed several hours earlier on what was about to transpire, and, in that time, had done a concerted job mustering resources for the attack. Within the firebase were a myriad vehicles ranging from mongoose vehicles to one questionably requisitioned M400 Yak mobile artillery unit. The Spartans tipped their hat to the captain. Vehicles, equipment, and troops were pouring in from every nook and cranny NSC and militia could muster. All told, there were over 30 ground craft and a mixed bag of several hundred Marines and soldiers supplement Pelican troop ports to ferry the rest toward the assault position. With the reconstituted Teal Force in hand, as many troops as Arthur and the Enders could muster, he was satisfied with the results. He continued the calming ritual of mission. The Spartans and ODSTs were doing the same. All quiet and focusing on the task at hand. Each of the 12 remaining planet-side ODSTs and a recently acquired were busy packing magazines, walking the dog through rehearsals, or stowing gear on their rides. A fleet of Hornet attack jets were fashioned in a neat row toward the flight deck, 5 in all. Each member of Teal Force had been cross-trained at one point to at least understanding of the flight and weapon control catastrophe. He reckoned now was as good a time as any to declare the necessity of ground pounders jumping into Hornets. A voice in his helmet broke the quiet monotony of slipping bullets into a half-filled magazine for his MA-5B. It was the governor and her military day. The rest of what we can spare should be almost done trickling in from the subterranean passageways that lead outside the city. Governor Melissa Huxley. Glad to see all the work of my forefathers paid off. He was referring to the original governors and civil servants of Boundary. Before the initial colonists' arrival back in 2490, there was a substantial effort to terraform the planet from an arid desert wasteland to what it was today. It was still nearly uninhabitable north of the range bisecting the supercontinent. He managed to pacify the southernmost region of the continent into arable land. For several decades, the ancestors of Boundary's comforts operated in the bunkers, roads, and other subterranean structures, until the atmosphere was deemed completely clear of hazardous particulates. These same passageways had saved a lot of lives already since the Covenant the atmosphere of the planet, and began their campaign of destruction. Whether it be fleeing civilians looking for refuge, ground troops, or militia fighters preparing booby traps, they paid dividends toward extending the life expectancy of denizens under siege. Arthur confirmed with Sheila, the team's expert, if the remaining militia fighters had emerged from the tunnels, without breaking stride as she hoisted a fresh missile pod onto the belly of her Hornet's chassis. A green flashed in the team leader's faceplate. That's an affirmative on the reserve troops, ma'am. Another voice chimed in. His onboard computer matched the voice print to Harvest Moon's personnel records. It identified the gruff voice belonging to Captain Maxwell Chalmers, another company commander under the tutelage of General Grant. "Half my outfit is yours, petty officer," he said. "I pulled them back from rear guard. Make 'em count." "It's much appreciated, sir. We'll get them sorted out and suited up. Teal Force out." Unfortunately, the pleasantries would have to wait. With the last auxiliary funneling into the base, the start of the mission clock was soon approaching. The Kodiak had its forward observer on and was almost settled into its semi-permanent firing position. Its large olive-drab arms quickly found purchase in the soft soil below. Farther beyond the Kodiak's gun line were the rest of the fleet, Warthogs being fired up, Pelican rotor wash blasting unsecured equipment, Hornets shimmering in the fading light of the heat. The squad leader finished final preparations on his own gear and located Captain Patel once again. He found the wiry, tanned commander supervising the equipment checks, platoon and squad leaders. As they passed inspection, one by one, the Marines and militia fighters took up position in their assigned seats, whether on an attack vehicle or Pelican. "Sir, are we ready?" "By the time you hit Hornet, we will be." The commander threw an index finger and waved it in a repeating circular motion, signaling everyone to mount up. Final preparations were made, and it was time for the assault position. Arthur moved to his bird and assumed position on the starboard side of his assigned craft, strapping the safety lines to several hard points on his armor. He needed to perform any evasive maneuvers. These would be the only thing between him and a dicey swim back to shore. Cal assumed the position flanking his own, situating herself on the port wing of the Hornet with Sheila the craft. Cal unslung her custom SRS-99 AM rifle and retrieved a 3-point sling and harness from her rucksack. She strapped the harness to the hard points on her side at shoulder level and rested the rifle on the sling. She was a formidable scout and sniper, and even from an elevated moving position, she was deadlier than any soldier, let alone most. Once the sniper was situated with her rig, she gave thumbs up to take off. At once, Sheila fired up the jet and began a slow hover over the firebase to broadcast the start of the mission clock and the next phase of operation. Arthur could see the other Hornets firing up and motioning in kind toward the eye above. 12 troopers clad in charcoal black ceramic-plated armor shone in the distance. Onyx faceplates reflected in sunlight as they glanced at the Teal Force commander for confirmation to execute the maneuver from their assembly area toward the cliffs to the west. Several moments passed by hovering in the air as Teal Force witnessed the impressive procession of vehicles and troops tearing out of the hangar their objectives. Arthur began his mission clock and opened the command frequency to ground commanders. "Operation Sleeping Giant is a go," he said. The mission counter on his HUD displayed a ticking. 00 moved to 01, and the company commanders began chiming over the command purposely sequestered from the general frequency to not bog down radio traffic. With no hiccup initial mobilization, the Hornet pilots gave the main force a few minutes head start before ushering into formation and heading to the coastline. A typhoon raged several dozen kilometers distant from the coastline. Beneath the fleet of Hornets were deep blues several meters in height, inspiring both beauty and ferocity as they crashed mercilessly upon the surf below. The males, a remnant of the harsh conditions this Goldilocks planet offered humanity. The Hornets changed vector and began to climb near vertical upon the sheer cliffs, covering their approach. Scarred upon the wall of ancient limestone bore the wounds of a violent cataclysmic event millennia ago. Several uninhabitable archipelagos lay dormant beyond the horizon, once belonging as part of the Pangea-like tectonic formations, similar to those of ancient. As the flight of AV-40 Hornets reached the apex of the cliff, Arthur first saw the deep of the damaged ship kilometers distant. He linked his personal HUD to the pilot's instruments behind him. The jet's enhanced optical package synced to his display so he could confirm the effects of the Kodiak's bombardment. While the Hornets darted into position to the western cliffs, main troops were cresting the saddle of two low-lying mountains to the south of battlecruisers. Tiny flying specks began to dispatch troops and Scorpion tanks outside the maximum range of the shade turrets farther inland. Like beetles scrambling from under a rock, dozens of warthog careened down the mountain path at breakneck speeds. Zigzagging between bursts of cannon fire and plasmas, they powered on through a scene straight from hell. Covering their advance was the incessant barrage from the Kodiak mobile artillery platform, peppering the ground with tiny shockwaves, disrupting troop formations before they could consolidate effective fighting units. Angled the Hornet forward, and the rotors rocked in tandem. The accelerated and began to rocket directly toward the damaged battlecruiser. 3-point defense weapons still trained on the raiding party to the south. Arthur, Cal, and Shaw focused on the next part of the plan, visually confirm the location of the landing zone, or LZ. Previous reconnaissance had identified that there were 4 hull breaches large enough for an insertion to land. Of those 4, 2 had been dismissed based on the patrol frequency of the crew within. Several grunt warriors and elite officers cleared debris and were fixing the rocket-scarred. That left the 5 Hornets' 2 zones, so 2 Hornets would land at the first with the 3 on the secondary site. It was Cal 141 who identified their section's LZ. The site beyond lay the remains of an hangar, which absorbed the kinetic energy of a civil cruise transport. Jagged scars etched the hangar's remains, and was so large the skeleton shone within. It was well over 15 width, plenty of room for 3 Hornets. The Spartan tagged the deck of hundreds of meters away. A light from each of the lights appeared on Arthur's display as they synced the vector to their craft. No sooner had Cal identified their LZs than the stationary turrets began to release a barrage of plasma fire toward the sky. The chain guns of the Hornets opened fire with a chorus of sound, only perforated by the screaming missiles loosed below. Tiny blooms of blue smoke burst into existence a kilometer away, as began their final approach to the landing zone. Sheila conducted an even maneuver, dipping to the left, then pulling up quickly to evade plasma. "Sir, those guns are opening up on us. Don't know how long our flight can dodge these shots." He raised broadsword escort in hopes they weren't too preoccupied with the Banshee and Seraph fighters covering the valley beyond. "Whiplash 1 on station. And Spartan?" The broadsword flight commander overcame the cacophony of screaming missiles and the torrent of wind whipping past the Spartan. "Could you Whiplash 1? We'll light it up. Stand." Arthur hopped channels to Team Comm. "Teal 4, designate targets." A green blip flashed in his VISR. He anticipated hostile aircraft and shipborne anti-air batteries, so Cal brought with her a targeting laser situated on her thigh mount. She quickly raised the device and began to paint the battlecruiser with a high-powered infrared laser. "Confirmed, Teal 4, shot out." A flight of broadswords punctured the cloud cover above and loosed a pair of M608T/MMP missiles directly over the Hornets and toward the chattering plasma turrets. The other 4 Hornets with Teal Force waggled their wings in elation as 2 balls of fire erupted from the lateral lines of the massive vessel ahead. "Good effect on it." "Acknowledged, Whiplash. Thanks." "Anytime, Teal Leader. Approach looks clear." "Roger that. We've got it. Looks like our south need a hand." "Affirmative, Teal Leader. Breaking formation." "Good luck in there." Whiplash 1. "Stay on target." Arthur-wise silent airwaves. He was within his own visual range, utilizing the magnification permitted him. He could see a deserted hangar, its platforms uneven by structural collapse. "LZ, conduct final approach." He unclipped the straps from the hardpoints on his armor and visually inspected his rifle a final time. When the Hornet was meters of the bay, he sprung off the deck of the jet toward the remains of the human ship lodged within. Arthur and Cal both rolled through the dive off the jet and toward cover. They swept the area and encountered no opposition. Arthur was thankful they got through this phase of the plan with no issue. Squad had a role to play if they wanted to maximize their likelihood of mission accomplishment. The primary mission remained the same. Destroy the battle via Fury thermonuclear handheld device, with the secondary objective of capturing any Covenant intelligence or technology. Arthur also needed to keep 1 squad in reserve to cover their escape, because the ship still had their engines in functioning order, as evident by the vessel about 100 meters the ground below. A stream of troops and equipment continued to ferry up and down the faint purple gravity lift, unaware of their approach. The trio of Spartans emerged from their covered positions. That seemed a little too easy, didn't it? It was Sheila over Team Comm. "Be fair, they're going to have their hands tied for a while with that Cody Rain," Cal retorted. "Let's just get quick." Arthur began issuing orders. "Sheila, find a terminal. We need to get far enough into the ship that the payload will maximize damage. Remember, we need the blast to reach the second ship. Cal, secure those hatches." The weight of his decisions began to eat away at his mind. Was this mission worth the cost to UNSC and Boundary Militia lives? He hadn't even bothered hearing Harvest Moon's assessment of the survivability of the main force. What was the point? Everyone had a role to play, and all Arthur knew was the faster they could get in and out, the faster the main force could withdraw back to Teal Bay. At least there, they stood a chance of living against the constant bombardment from Covenant. He radioed Quadcom. "Assault and security teams, status," he demanded. Over his right shoulder, he could see the last Hornet touching down on a similar-looking breach in the hull of the cruiser. 3 lad warriors hopped out, quickly exchanged fire of poorly armed grunts, then responded. assault team set standing by for orders. Cal showed them the way, and with that, the Spartan darted over to a corridor toward the rear of the hangar and disappeared. She would locate the assault team's position via their FOEGs and ferry them back to Sheila's and Arthur's position. Secure team set and holding RC in the distant haze of ionized atmosphere, mostly from a damaged pipe or even the brief firefight moments earlier. A Marine glancing toward Arthur. He gave a thumbs-up sign and began issuing his own orders. While their own internal security would watch for interlopers, the rest of the team would be guns, equipment, and other technology. The eggheads at Oni's Beta 3 division if they could ever make it off boundary. Sheila waved over to Arthur, indicating she had located their most route toward the belly of the ship. He jogged over and took a look at the display himself. A confusing route which meandered the superstructure of the ship was highlighted in the hologram before him. At the terminal, their route lay a massive chamber, which explained was the main hangar bay. All they would have to do was hide the bomb and hightail it out of there. With any luck, they'd be in and out in a matter of minutes. Cal returned after a minute of traversing the passageways between the two landing zones with 8 ODSTs following close behind. Each soldier was heavily laden with extra ammunition, explosives, and spare equipment. Going into a mission blind was extremely dangerous, but they didn't have any other option. It was either bring the fight to the Covenant or die in the streets of the city. Arthur had to make a tough decision, and without the support of Captain Fulton and his defense force, this was their most viable option. Together, the group began to work their way down the extravagant hallways of the Covenant battlecruiser. Each corridor over 3 meters in height and width, with most of its surface area covered in the odd, etched calligraphy familiars. Purple hues painted the walls and decks, accented by the unusually organic architecture of the ship's layout. Sheila was on point now as the group there marched toward the central hangar of the ship. Arthur continued to monitor her position via a tracker. At once, saw a stream of plasma fire to his front, and immediately raised Sheila on comm. Teal 3 status, he barked, and began issuing Cal and the fire team of ODSTs he had with him. Usei Taham sat at his station, monitoring the ongoing battle raging below his former ship. He was now fully integrated into the undiminished Enteleki's roster, having found a situated with the rest of the Sangheli officers aboard. Several cycles ago, he had a fleeting mutiny spurred on by disgraced shipmaster Sizwai Udumi. Ensuing drama, he was struck by his very own fleet, their ruthless leader, Thel Vadami. To test the mettle of the new fleetmaster, Usei had challenged Vadami to trial by combat. If he failed to make a show, it was Usei's sworn duty to strike. This was the way of the warrior that was drilled into him from birth. His uncles developed Usei into a capable warrior at a young age, even studying at one of Sanghelios's most prestigious war colleges. Shortly thereafter, he was identified by several prominent leaders for his prowess with a blade, even being offered a position as a coveted honor guard, protectors of the high prophets themselves. Although a prestigious honor, the Sangheli wished to be blooded in common respect through his combat prowess, not live a comfortable life back on the Mobile City High Charity with the rest of the bureaucrats of the prophet race. Usei was determined to make a name for himself, and a name he would make. After a brief sparring session with the budding flare, Usei was satisfied to find he was no fool and worthy of his station. Usei had purposely displayed a tell to see if he would pick up on it, waited for a swift victory. He had no doubt the Fleetmaster was a talented blade master and warrior in his own right, but not many Usei had ever faced lived with his own talents. Fleetmaster was determined, cunning, and charismatic. He embers of an insurgency within his swift and decisive hand, claiming his once trusted advisor and peer, Siswai process. Now newly minted Chief Security Officer Usei Taham sat unconscious at his station, witnessing the carnage a modest distance away when an alarm chimed from the tactical display on his gauntleted forearm. He reached toward his arm with a long, scaly digit and tapped the strobing light, purity of spirit hailing the bridge of the Enteleki. The message was brief and hurried. She patrol craft site aircraft off the port side of Purity. Craft engaged fact. Engineering reports human demons boarding a compromised section of hull. Raise general quarters and prepare to repel board. Demons referred to the Covenant of the abnormally enhanced humans. Usei had never witnessed one in person, but during his time aboard Buddy and its sister ship, the Intelechi, he had heard of the dangerous humans by other veteran Sangheli. He sage, how dare these infidels death their holiest of ships, blessed by the Sanshayum themselves. He terminated the report and stood from his station, with Fleet Master Vadami indisposed on the ground. It was up to Usei Taham to do something about the intruders. Fleet Master preferred to lead from the front. As far as Usei knew, Vadami was plunging into the heart of a worthless human at this very moment. Acting swiftly, Usei delegated Kamak's elite warrior in the chain of command. Clacking his four-jawed mandibles in anticipation, he stormed off the bridge to retrieve his gear. Due to the recent incursion by the humans from the mountain range just before their set, everyone was ordered to don their combat harnesses. Even the bridge crew were clad in the crimson-sheened nano-laminate armor. On the way to his quarters, the blade man hailed the purity of spirit. "Have the demons been found yet?" A hesitant response came from a lower-ranking Sangheli on the other end. "No, Blade Master. The demons are nowhere to be found, but we have engaged several human warriors defending their landing site. I have dispatched additional warriors to take care of them. A handful of Nishum are nothing of consequence." He compared the infinitesimal human soldiers to the parasitic intestinal worm common to the Sangheli people. Usei snapped his mandibles. He did not care for the goings-on of a few inconsequential human warriors. He wanted a challenge. If the demon warriors' reputation preceded them, then they were the true threat. Find the demons. Track their movements. I am on my way to the humans' landing site now. Chief Security Officer Usei Taham gathered a handful of trusted warriors on his way to a starboard hangar of the unrelenting Intelechi and claimed a Banshee fighter craft for himself. A squad of elite warriors did the same. The massive energy barrier beyond collapsed as the flight of Banshee's lateral gravity pods flickered to life, raising the purple crucifix-shaped craft off the deck and careening toward the purity of spirit. And if my cadre of elites can't stop them, Usei thought to himself, then I'll rout them from my ship in a more direct manner. The cowl of the Banshee hissed faintly as it closed on the fuselage of the craft, and the flight of warriors darted toward their quarry.